So the function, a function that returns a value are functions whereby they will start with int. It can be an int. We've been working with int main. Int main is a function that returns a value. That's why it have an int. You can have a function like float. Maybe you say float. It can be float. A name main. Remember, it's a name. You can say float calculator. It can be a function that returns a value too. So I'm going to show you based on an example on how you can write that function. So now when we write the functions, I told you guys that you can start with a function. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to say float. I'm going to use a float. So when I say float, I'm going to say float calcu. Then I'm going to be using a float x. I'm also going to say float x. Then I will also say float y. So the purpose of this function is to multiply. We are going to multiply two floating numbers. So when we are going to multiply these two floating numbers, we can, because this function is a return function, we can tell it to return x multiplied by y. When we say x multiplied by y, the floating number that is going to get is going to multiply it with the first one for x and y. So now here in my function, I will also need to do something. In order for me to get the data of x and y, sometimes I might want a user to enter those two floating numbers. I can now have a void function. A void function, we are only using it to get the data. So we can just say void get data. Get data. When I say void get data, I will tell the user my function that is going to get a float value, which we can still use as x, and then also a float value that we can use as y. So now here in my void data, I can tell it to see out. I can ask a user to enter two floating decimal number. Then the user will enter two decimal number. Then I will capture those two decimal number by cin. I will say x, the other one is going to be y. So now when the only thing that you must remember, in void function, we don't use the word written. So now if you check here, I'm getting to get values in my void function, and I'm still going to use those values irrespective of the name is the same, y and y, it does not matter. The point that I'm going to need to use those values in another function, we have something called referencing. We call it referencing as a referencing as a parameter. So when we say reference as a parameter, we use this symbol and symbol. So it means that when I put here, after my x, I put that symbol, and also my y, I put the symbol. The meaning of this, it means that in this data, if a person enter 5 point something, we are going to be able to access them to another function, which is called calcu. So if I only put reference here and I don't put reference on y, the y, it won't be able to be accessed. So why am I doing this? What exactly happens in the computer when we put the reference like this? We are sending the memory allocation address of the data that the user entered, of the data that the user entered. So the memory allocation address, it can be written in terms of numbers that we don't know. Sometimes can be 0, 1x, 1, 0, b, y. It can be a memory allocation address for those data. So the moment when we send the memory allocation address, and this one, when it comes, is going to check in the memory card allocation, it's going to find the data that the user entered, then it's going to use them. So now when you know about that as a referencing, we're still going to discuss more about the referencing in the course 1512 as a pointers. We are going to do a chapter called pointers. So you're going to learn more about this referencing as a parameter in pointers. So now when you have done this, enter two decimal number, the user will enter. Then this function is going to multiply them. When it multiplies them, we can call our function. When we call our function, we're going to call it in the int main. Then when I call my function, I just write the name of my functions. The first function that I'm going to call is get data. I will call it like this way. Then this one, because it have a return, when I call it, if I just call it without, I must put C out so that we can see the output. I have to say C out so that I can see my output. Then I can say calcu. You will see it here. Then I will be able to see my output. But if I don't call it that way, it will work. It won't have any problem. But the only problem that I will have is that I won't be able to see the results because of there is no C out there. So I can also put C out here just to make a end line, just to separate them. So now doing this one already told you guys that this is a function. We call it a function call. We call it a function call. Even this way here, we call it a function call, but just that I put C out so that we can see, because here in my function, there is no C out, so that we can see the results of this return X multiplied by Y. So if we build our code, it will tell us get data. It have a problem. Let's see, error, too few arguments. So now we are going to have a problem because of in our get data here, we have float X and float Y. So you can also declare two values. We can say we're using float. You can use any variables. I can use A and B, float A and B. Then in my here, I will put A and I will put B. And then also in my this one, it also use in the parameters. If you read here, it says few error, too few arguments to function void get data. And then also in 21 is gonna tell you in 21 is this one for 22 is gonna tell you that there is also few argument also. So even here we're gonna use A and B. So the way we replace them here, if I use A and B, if sometimes you are working with different data, you use B and A, it's gonna take the one for Y, start with and. So I'm gonna show you what I mean when I'm using a division sign. So now if I build my code, I hope there will be no errors. As you can see, there are no errors in our code. When there are no errors in our code, then we can run our code. So when we run our code, we'll see that is enter two decimal number. I can enter 5.4, and then I will enter also 10.6. So if you check in your calculator, if you say 5.4 multiplied by 10.6, it's gonna give you 57.24. So this is how we get it. So let me go back to the functions. And because here, if you see here, I just opened this, does not necessarily mean that this, what I open here, you really need to use them. You can even let me just cancel them. They are not really necessary for now. They are just header file for some other things that I was doing before when I was programming in this file for functions. So if let's check back, we started with void get data. This is a name of our function. You can use any name that you want. And then your name of a function, it must be define exactly what the function is going to be doing. But even though it's not really defining, your functions are going to still work. It's just that if you are giving your code to somebody, another programmer, they must be able to read your code, not having problems. But sometimes when you're a programmer, you will want to write a code whereby the other programmers, they must not be able to read easily your code for stealing purposes. So do you have any question? You don't have any questions? You go to your float. Now you know about referencing. You must remember this thing is very important, referencing. And then after that, we went to this one for return. So we also declare in the int main, we declared a val float a and b again, and a and b again. So that was fine. So now we have this, you run your code. So if my purpose, let's say it was x divided by y, then we're gonna put, I'm gonna build my code. The first thing that you're gonna see here, if I will put the first one, I'm gonna put 10. Then the second one, I will put 5. We know the answer is going to be 2. Then your answer is 2. You see that? So now I'm still going to put the same variables. I'm going to swap here. If I put B here, it's still going to work. I say B and what? And A. The data now, they are going to be more different because of, it's going to start with saying, here, if I say 10 divided by 5, it's going to give us 2. Now it's going to say 5 divided by 10. So let's do it and we prove the point. So if I put 10 again and I put 5, you can see now the answer is 0, 5. You see that? Because of we swap them. So the way you use from one function to another, it must correspond exactly with the questions that you asked. Unless that's if the question, they can ask you to say, okay, use ask a data, then you must swap. It must do the reverse. It depends on the question. But here I'm just showing you all these tricks that you must take into account. So the values that you put like this way, if you put A and B like this, in these functions, when they come A, is know that is X and Y down. Now when you put X and like that, then the function, it won't work, but you can do this way in order for you, if the question that you asked, even if I put AA, you will see that if I put AA both right, it doesn't care. It's a program. What it's gonna do is if the first one is 10, it's going to take 10 divided by 10, which is 1. So this is how the functions works. So the first function that I have written here, I have written a function of void and then a function that return a value. Then you can also write a function whereby it will still return a value. Let me delete this one here. Let's say here you are writing get data. Then we are going to use a string. I will say string X is fine. Then when we use a string X, we ask a user to enter your name. Enter your name and then we're gonna use C in name. Then we still want to see out again. We ask a user to enter the salary, see out, enter your monthly salary. Then see in again salary. Then sometimes instead of using the C in name, see in here, what if a user enter a name and a sign name? When you say enter name and it want a user to capture everything that a user entered, we can use a get line. So instead of this one, I can erase this one. I use my get line. So when I use my get line, you know that is C in dot X dot, you can say /n. So this one is going to capture everything that a user will enter. And remember, I think it's semicolon here, not dot. We'll see it when let me just check if there will be some lines here. Number 9. Okay, salary we use it as Y. So we're not supposed to say this salary. We used it as Y, so it does not know that. So now in get data, we have X and Y. And our A now, we can change A not to be, we can change A to be a string. A string A, we can just say string A is still fine. So in our function here, there are some things that we need to change. The get data is fine, enter a name, this one is okay, yeah. Then we also maybe want to pass, this function now is unnecessary. So now we might want to pass the name and the sign name, or we want to pass only the what? We want to pass only the amount, enter the monthly salary. So the following function is going to, we're going to use a float. It's going to be float salary, float tax. Let's say float tax. So we are going to check how much this person like pays for tax. Then we're gonna say float y. So when we say float y, we are passing only the value reference, this one, which means there is no need, but you can just leave it like that. Then we might say our salary tax, let's say the constant, we're gonna make a constant int, constant float, let's say tax with capital letters, you say equals to 0.15. Then we're gonna also declare, let's say, you can also say float inside here. This is just the same as declaration. We can say float tax amount. You just say tax A like that is fine. Then our tax A, you can see it's appearing there. We're gonna say equals to, we call this value, which is y, is y, where mi is y. We multiply it by what? Y multiply it by tax. So instead of this tax and then yes, tax. So instead of this one, we can introduce a return here. We say return tax A, which is equals to that. Then when we return this function, which is called tax, is going to return the amount that the amount that this person must pay. So when we come here, it's going to get the data. Then we can see out, we say, see out, let's say X, the A, we know that is going to be the name. Amount, tax amount, you can just say tax amount. You put a semicolon. Then after when you put a semicolon, we can see out, we call our function. Our function is called tax. Tax, get data here, is called tax. So it's gonna show here. Then we can build our code. Let's check if we made some errors. Yes, it's going to complain here. In this text here, only one thing is needed, not one. Only two things are needed in this function called text. We need it to have two parameters. So maybe in order for you not to get confused, let me just copy this text float here. I'm gonna copy it, delete. Then I'm gonna paste it here inside the function. So if I paste it here inside the function, then when I declare, here in my function, I'm going only to put B. So when I put B only, because we make our function to be one parameter. So now it will be fine. So if I didn't delete anything, which means I was supposed to say, have another float, maybe C. So I'm avoiding that. So now you will see that now when we finish, we have no errors in our code. We can run our code. To ask me to enter the name, I will say Matamela. Enter. Please enter your salary. I earn 2,000 a month. Then Matamela, you can see Matamela tax amount 300 rand, which means if we say 2,000 multiplied by 0.15 is gonna be 2,300. So this is how you build functions. So as I've told you guys, the purpose of a function is to break down your code. Imagine sometimes you have to write a code because it will happen that you write a code whereby there is 15 pages. So you are just writing one thing in int main. These things we can still do it in one function called int main. But now your function can be readable properly if you break them into pieces. So the first one here, I can, even if I have to send my code, if it's a company, they ask me to write a project maybe to help them with a project, I can do this project, have a comment. When I comment, I can show, okay, can comment here, this function. Let me just comment. I can tell them this function is to get, you see, get the name and the salary of an employee. So because of the way I've commented is too much here, as you know, you can put post slash star, then you come here, you put star slash, then you have commented. The person knows now, oh, this function here, I come to this one, I can put again star slash star. Then I can write what is all about this function here. This one is to calculate the what? To calculate the tax amount. You see, so my code is more readable. Ne? You can come and comment here also, but I'm not gonna comment now. I was just showing you. So my function can be readable. You might find that the person that in the company, they gave me this project, but they only wanted maybe to use this. So they can just copy this function, then they use it in their program, because normally what happens in the companies will have their own programmers. But you might find that the programmers in that company, they cannot solve a problem in such a way that the company now they have to hire an external person like me to help them to solve that program. So, but they already did theirs. So I can do everything, but you find that they just needed maybe only one function that they were missing. So that's how it happens. But this one is just a beginning. We're still going to do more things when we write a code. So I'm gonna build your code. It's still gonna be the same. It's gonna work the same way. Like that. So any question?
No.
You don't have any questions. So maybe you can go. Let's check in your study guide. So you see, these things are easy if you follow in and you don't have problems. Just gonna open anything. Okay. Consider. Okay. I just opened this randomly. Explain the difference between the function double number 1 and the double number 2. For each function, provided a statement that calls the function for each function. And they say, and for each function, provide a statement that calls the function. What is the difference between these two functions? The difference I already told you. The first function does not return what? It does not return a value. This is the answer that they want. The second function, it returns a value. That's the different. It returns. It returns a value. How? Provide. The second one says, for each function, provide a statement that calls the functions. How do you call a function? You write double. The way this name, you write the name, double number, number one in brackets. Maybe you say what? A, value A, sim enter. Then the second one, or you just write value, double number. You can even use the word value there. You say value inside, I will just say VA. Then double again, double number two. You write a value. That's how it calls a function in the int main. So just that I started this question, write a function header for each of the following. We go to our questions. Here, the way we're doing, where am I in code block? When we write this, exactly what I have highlighted here, we call it a function. It's a function header. Function header. So this is a function header. Also, this one here in void. Void, this is also a function header. It's a function header. Then, now we know what is a function header. We go to a question paper. Write a function header for each of the following. Now we're going to answer the first question. Says the function check. This is the name of a function check. It has two parameters. When they say it have two parameters, it means inside here the brackets, there must be A and B. But you know how we declare it. It can be float, it can be double. We don't know. The first parameter should be a function. This is a function check. The first parameter should be integer. We are already told it must be an integer. The second parameter should be a floating. The function, then they say the function returns no value. So when they say function returns no value, it means that we have a void function. So when I write my header function, I'm going to start with a void. Void, what is the name of my function is check. Void check in brackets. The first int function, it have two int, it's an integer. I'm gonna say int x. I can use x value. Then the second one is what is floating, is float. I can use y. Close brackets, I'm done. Do you understand now?
Yeah.
Hello? Any question?
Just a bit.
Any question?
No.
All right. We go to a second one. This is a function. The function multi, this is the name of our function, has two floating. They already told us both of them, they are two floating numbers as a parameter and return the results as multiplying them. So because they return a result, we know that now we are no longer working with void. We are working with a function that returns a result as a multiplying them. So because it have two floating number, I can decide, okay, I'm going to use a float as what? Float multi. In brackets, I'm gonna say float is a two floating number, float x, comma, float what? Float y. I'm done. This is a function header. You write only that. The function call, we have a function, the function time, we have a time, it inputs what? It inputs seconds. Inputs means that it's inserting something, which means there must be a in. Minutes, hours, which are all integers value. They are all integers value and returns them as a parameter to it returns them. This function it's returning. So everything if it's integer, which means everything that is going to return there is going to return them as an int. You just say int time. In brackets, it return them as input is an int. It's an integer. Int second, you can say as int minutes. Then we can also have int hours. You can use NH, or you can even write int seconds, int minutes, everything that way. But what's a function header? You are only needed this on top. The body is not wanted, the body of a function. When we talk about a body of a function, I'm going to highlight here. Everything after, from the brace until the end, it's a body of a function. Everything that I've highlighted is a body of a function. So the header file, this is a header file. Header function header. Any question?
No.
You don't have, okay. Let me try to check another question. Hello?
Hello, I have a question.
Okay.
I just want to understand when declaring, I see you saying float X, float Y.
Yes.
Remember when we were using integers, we just said int X, comma Y, all in one bracket. Is it
Yes,
really
here,
necessary for saying
this
float
one here
X,
in
comma?
function. This one is a function, né?
Mhm.
So when we are working in function, you cannot inside the function, inside the parameters of function, you cannot say float only X and Y. You only do it when you are inside the body of a function.
Oh, okay.
In the brackets, everything is must be float X, comma. If it's still float, you're gonna say float Y inside the.
Integer, comma,
Yes.
until you are okay. No, it's clear.
Yes, but outside of the inside the function, you see here, if it's here, outside here, like here, I can do that. But here inside here, the brackets, we don't do it.
Okay.
It will tell you that it does not understand why.
Okay.
Yes. Any question? So if you don't have a question, I'm just, this is a question paper. You see, it's May, June 2018. Eh? This question, they always come. This one I'm showing you with. They always come, but they come in different way. It might not really come, but these 3 marks is, you must make sure that you have them. So now I explained the difference between, we already explained this one. So just for today's lesson, from A, you must be able to answer A, must be able to answer question like B. It's very simple. Even C, you must be able to answer it. So I'm going to read C and see if you, according to what I've taught you, you can answer it. Then I'm gonna give you guys as a homework. Write a function that returns the cubic. Write a function that returns the cubic of the integer passed to it. For example, cube 2 will return 8. Cube 3 will return 27. Means is 2 to the power 3 is 8. Yes. Also complete the main function that calls the cubic function. Not yes. So I want you guys to write this function. Write this. You are not copying what they wrote there. You are only answering this question. Can you take a picture of only the question? Only this question. Are you done taking the picture?
Hold on a bit.
Yes. So I just want to write a function. Use a code block. I want you to program it. Anytime when you are done, because you have assignments. First deal with assignments. Anytime when you are done, just you can send it to me. So it's not something that is in. It's not an urgent problem.
Okay.
All right. Let me know when you are done.
Done.
All right. Are you done writing, right? Then if you are done copying, taking a pictures, both of you, then if you have questions, you can let me know. if you have any question, I'm free. Just that there is nothing much I want to add here. I want you guys to focus on what we just did today.
Can you also forward this video for me, because there was a part where my network disconnected.
All right, no problem. Let me even stop the video as we speak.